Hey guys, I'm Carlos, and I know I'm very late with this, and Luke actually asked for this like almost a month ago, maybe, I don't know, but I've been super busy, but I am finally settled for the most part, and yeah, this is my testimony video. Yeah, um, yeah, I'm gonna be reading off a script because I don't want to get on into a rabbit hole about all the traumas in my life. So yeah. So I was born in May of 2002, and my family wasn't exactly a Christian. I wasn't exactly a Christian family, so my parents weren't believers when I was born. Um, but it all kind of began with my mom. When I was around 2, she was saved and baptized in the church. Um, to speak kind of in the background to understand who I am, I'm gonna also kind of speak into the testimony of my parents. So my mom was raised in Catholicism. She studied it. She was a hardcore Catholic. She's been studying all the things, niches about it since she was like, I think she told me 8, 7 or 8, something like that. So really young. And she kind of had this like emotional, abusive upbringing with her parents, and emotionally neglected as well. But yeah, she was the first to convert when I was 2. And then my dad um, was actually raised in a very emotionally and physically abusive home. Um, and yeah, I won't speak too much into it, but he didn't know love as a kid. So he was raised in a really rough home. And they were so-called Catholic. And it took him a little more time, but when I was around 4 or 5 years old, that's whenever he decided to convert into Christianity. Was saved and baptized as well. So yeah, my parents were baby believers, baby Christians, helping raise my brother and I, who were also a handful. So yeah, in the beginning, it was just me and my mom. I was a fat little kid, so my mom would convince me to go to church by bringing me to Chinese buffets after every Sunday. This is all what my mom, I don't remember when I was little, but this is what my mom says. She would convince me by taking me to Chinese buffet, even though I didn't want to go to church. I'd be convinced because of the food. And because of me not wanting to go, there was a point when the Chinese buffet apparently wasn't working. It convicted my dad to go to church. And with Edwin's my younger brother, but with Edwin coming to the picture, it started moving him to want to go to church more. And my mom also said apparently I prayed for baby brother. So I guess that's part of my testimony. I think it's pretty cool. But yeah. So growing up, also my dad wasn't the very most patient person. He was very quick to anger. He wasn't like very loving. He loved in his way that he knew. Again, just reminding you of what I said earlier about how he was raised. He was loving me in the way that he knew what love was, and wasn't exactly the soft person, if you would say that. But that's where my mom came in. And that's when I was more of a mama's boy. I was more fond of my mom and going to my mom more about anything versus, with my dad. So yeah. And then once I was about 8, I started playing soccer. And the reason I mentioned that is because if you know me, like Luke, and I'm pretty sure Bennett's is in the chat as well, that soccer was a huge part of my life. And I started when I was about 8, and this was forcefully, so I didn't want to play soccer at first. And I didn't really want to. I didn't really like it. And then as time moved on, about when I was 9 or 10, it's like a year or 2 later, I started really enjoying the sport, and it became an identity for me. So all I could think about was soccer, every time I go to sleep, my first, I'd be like, oh, I have a game tomorrow or I have to practice, whatever, this and that. I just wanted to become the best at the sport. Um, and yeah, and even though it was a huge idol in my life, I didn't like it at the same time because my dad was very critical about how I would play, no matter what. So even if I had like the best game of my life, my dad would always point out like the smallest things, like smallest mistakes I'd make, and that really caused a lot of low self-esteem um, when I was younger. But I'm thankful for it now because it drives me to have a better work ethic than most people, and I have him to thank for that. But either way, yeah. And I also had someone who I was close to, which was my older brother, a half brother, but older brother, who after some time being with me, who I grew fond of him, up and left without telling me anything, without any explanation. And then that caused a lot of feelings of like um, worthlessness. So I felt like I had no value, or nobody was gonna love me. And yeah, this was all before I even hit middle school. So yeah, going into middle school, I got into the wrong crowd. I went to a really bad middle school my 6th grade year, and yeah, people I was hanging out with got me into doing drugs. I loved to fight a lot. I was drinking alcohol as a 6th grader, and began watching porn. And the thing about it is, whenever you're a kid going to church, you learn to not do those things. But I loved it. I really loved doing those things, and there was no conviction at all to do it. And then I also had an uncle who I had grown close with, who was ministering to me, growing me closer. He around that time um, died from a brain tumor. So there I felt this type of abandonment again, and that's whenever I really started shutting myself from God. And I was like, if he's so good, then why would he do these things? Why would he let the people die of the people who are wanting to bring me closer to him? So, but yeah, and then I had a friend as well, a really close friend who I'd hang out with all the time. That was killed in front of me because of me. And that being is because the people who killed him were looking for me and were wanting to go after me. So yeah, we were walking together one day, and well, to cut it short, he was the one who got killed instead of me. So that brought a lot of self-blame into my life, which is something that I still struggle with. Not the specific event, but just in general, blaming myself for a lot of things and not letting go of that blame is still strong in my life. But yeah. So a lot of those addictions that I mentioned earlier, around the 8th grade, I started to, 7th grade more, I started to cut off because I wanted to take sports seriously. So I was training and stuff more. I was like playing and getting ready to play bigger levels, and I started quitting those things for soccer and not, because I was a Christian. And then once I got to high school, I fell into sexual sin along with those things, with those addictions that I mentioned earlier. So I lost my virginity around when I was 16, and along with that came the other things again. So I had a good streak of not doing anything, being the good kid, good example, and then falling into that again. But during this whole time, I was covering everything up, and no one knew what I was struggling with. No one knew what I was hiding, those sins, you know. And yeah, then I cleaned up around when I was 18, from the drugs and the alcohol, but I couldn't find freedom from from the sexual sin. So there's this feeling of hopelessness in my life. And then once again, I think I was 17 or 18, I don't know. My senior year of high school, I tore my ACL. And this was huge for me, just because I had many opportunities to play soccer in other places. And then once I tore my ACL, a lot of those offers got, got taken away, stripped away. They offered less or whatever. So there was this sense of like, oh man, like I'm not wanted anymore. I've been rejected, or this like this casted out feeling, like you don't belong somewhere now, because this identity of soccer was being ripped away, and that me wanting to play at a higher level was taken away from me during this time. So I was trying to fill that emptiness of that identity with other things, like the things that I mentioned, that I was mentioning earlier. So with that, I decided to take a gap year from school, and I decided to work at Walmart. So although I did work a lot, I was working like 50-hour weeks, as in fresh 18-year-old, 50, 55, whatever. I was still like lying to my parents about my hours. So like after hours, I would try to work like until late at night. I'd go off and go with other people to party. I was going to other people's houses and doing, stuff that wasn't right. And I would use that as well to avoid my family and, do my own thing. So like if there was a birthday party that they wanted me to go to, I'd be like, nah, I gotta work this day. When in reality, I had enough time to get off and then go to the party and whatever. So yeah. And then June and July, before I went to Emmaus, was like a time of like, for some reason I had some reflection, and I was like, I need something to change for me. Like I can't be in this place. Like stuff got really bad for me, and I was like, I need to go away. So at the end of July, I made this decision that instead of going to this one college I was going to go to, which is Brevard College, which was like the most ideal college I could have gone to. Like it was just the perfect college. I loved it. I loved the scenery, the size, and everything. Like it had everything I could have asked for. And I was also going to play on the team. I was given a roster spot and everything. I decided to go to Emmaus instead. Reason being to run away from my problems and also to play soccer. But yeah, it was kind of just this sudden change that my parents didn't want as well. But yeah, my first year at Emmaus was, well, at least my first semester, it was like really rough. Like I didn't really talk to anyone. So I was in my room, or I was away from Emmaus, at other colleges. I was homesick. I really wanted to go home all the time. I really didn't try to make friends. I was doing some of those sins or those addictions. My first semester there, the things that I was running away from, and I wasn't really going to church. So then I started making friends during that first semester towards the end. One of my friends being Luke, was one of the first friends I made at Emmaus, and who is still my friend today. Thank you, Luke. And I started working at the Emmaus kitchen because I was like, I need a job. The season's over. I have nothing to do. And I met these 3 kids, 2 who were brother and sister. The other just went to the same school, who had recently moved there. And they invited me to go to youth group that November. And it took a while, up until February, that I finally agreed, because I was so annoyed. And I was like, fine, I'll go for once. And praise the Lord that I went, because that's whenever my heart for youth ministry began. And that's why I'm able to be at this church, working as a youth family intern. So long way I've came from my first year. But yeah. In the spring semester, I started taking my faith as my own, and I grew in my knowledge and in my faith. I was growing pretty fast, and you know, they didn't have a youth group here after COVID, and my heart started yearning to want to help. And then the church that I'm at right now allowed me to, take over the youth group and start it from scratch. And I really wanted to help, so I became the youth director for the summer. Kind of what I'm doing now, instead I'm an intern with a lot more knowledge. So I had no idea what I was doing during that summer, because I was a pre-professional health degree at the moment. Like, I was studying to be a physical therapist, not to be a youth minister. And I just had two goals in mind: give them Jesus, and to keep them off the streets. Because where I'm from, like, a lot of these kids are either friends or themselves are in gangs, and there's a lot of street violence going on here. And that what I wanted to do was just keep them off the streets, not give them the opportunity to be with those friends, and to give them Jesus, because I saw Jesus working in my life, and that I wanted the same for them. So, and then I was also working out heavy for the soccer season, which is something very important that will come up. So coming from a very spiritual high into my sophomore year, I was in good shape. I was where I wanted to be. And then during the preseason, I completely tore my ACL. So I came into Emmaus with a partially torn ACL. I completely tore my ACL, and I rehabbed. I was able to play 4 games, and then I hurt myself again during that 4th game, and I tore my meniscus that game. So I was out for the season, and I needed surgery. So there, I fell apart spiritually and mentally, honestly, because I was just relying on myself and not on Christ. And leading up to this point, everything I had inside of me, like, I had bottled everything up, and I hadn't learned how to let go yet, was starting to come out. And I hurt a lot of people during that time, and I lost relationships because of it. So I I had the surgery. I was a mess, and my mom was here for a little while, and she was kind of my anchor. But once she left, I had nothing to hold on to. And yeah, I lost myself. In all honesty, I was like this huge mess. And yeah, so things happened, relationships broke, and God used that to break me and to remold me into something that I have been growing into, which is someone who follows him. I was just following myself up to this point, and he broke me. He put me through the fire, and he's molded me into where he wants me to be, and is continuously molding me now. I was like this mentally, physically, emotionally, and especially spiritually, I was a mess. But God used it to get me back together. So during this time, like, Luke encouraged me to apply for Hidden Acres, and I did, and I got the job, and I went home. I was like, Mom, I'm going to stay in Iowa for the summer and work at camp. And then I had to go to Mexico for some reasons, and I decided to drive up for the summer at Hidden Acres for the summer, off of 3 hours of sleep, a 19-hour drive, which is I don't recommend doing. So yeah, then I found out I was going to be one of the captains for the team as well. So it was a good summer. it was I relaxed. I was able to relax some. I learned how to evangelize in Mexico and seeing and meeting family like for the first time since 2014. Um, and yeah, Hidden Acres was such a great experience as well. It was a really fun summer. I made new friends. I grew a lot spiritually, and I learned how to truly abide in Christ. And I learned how to give the gospel. I actually learned how to share the gospel at Hidden Acres. Fun fact. Um, and then I also worked at FCA, which is Fellowship for Christian Athletes. They hold a camp in Pella, Iowa. I learned how to. I worked for them, and it was also a great experience. It was a really fun week. I met Bennett there actually. I had known that he was coming to Emmaus, but that's when I formally met Bennett and his family, and I grew a lot spiritually there, and made friends. But I also learned how to forgive myself and how to let go of things. Those things that I was bottling up, I learned how to let that go. I also learned whenever it's hard to love. I learned how to have patience, and again, I learned how to share the gospel. And yeah, during that time, during the summer, I had this when I was like, might as well. I switched majors to educational ministries. I went home for a little bit. I went to go grab Edwin, my little brother, because he was going to come to Emmaus as well. And then I came back to Iowa, and I went to Luke's wedding, which was a very beautiful wedding. Yeah, I never have seen like such a Christ-centered wedding, and that was the first time I experienced it. And yeah, it rechanged like the whole mind I had about weddings. So yeah, I didn't play at all my junior year of soccer because I wasn't cleared. There's a whole thing with insurance and doctors, and yeah, but God used that time during my junior year to remove soccer as an idol from my life. And it was like weird because I was a captain, but I was on the bench. But it was like I wanted to be an example for others to work hard, even if you weren't playing and stuff. And I was working hard in my rehab, and even though I never got cleared, I showed this perseverance that I was required of, and yeah, I took a lot of educational ministry and a lot of psychology classes, which helped me a lot with reflection and growing, seeing how I grew up and what kind of a mess I was, and helped me grow to become better. That's whenever I really began to disciple people as well and to evangelize to others. And I had this desire in me to want to go and share the gospel with those who are lost and even those who are saved, because gospel is a message for every day and not just for a one-time purpose of transformation, but is a continual one. So the main thing for me this year was just to be all in for Jesus and to live for him. That's really what I learned that year. So again, for the summer, I went back to Hidden Acres, and I was able to see old friends, make new ones, and I was able to disciple people from camp, and then grow independence of God, and learn how to be grateful. I think this is a summer that I really learned to be very grateful for everything that I have. And I witnessed a lot of some really crazy things that God did that summer in the hearts of the campers and staff. We had this testimony night for my cabin, and just being able to see those guys share their hearts and they transform and then want to be there for each other was just, I'm not a very, tearful person, but I dang near cried. I'm not gonna lie during it because of how powerful it was. there and then, and I was just taken away about how we can just be centered around Christ and how that brings us together in love, you know. And yeah, it was crazy. And then just this past year, during my senior year, I really I was grateful. You know, I was able to finally play soccer for an entire season, which was the first time I was able to do it since my 8th grade year. So it was, you know, I was extremely grateful for that, and it was really fun. Um, you know, I tried to praise God and glorify God through every game that I played. I didn't do it perfectly, you know, through every game in practice, but I tried, and I hope that was evident to the people around me. And, you know, just seeing God work in the team spiritually and have this, you know, just seeing them want to, you know, grow closer to God was just something amazing to see. And, you know, whenever we'd go travel, I try to use some of the time to go and speak to random people and try to share the gospel with them. It was just like precious little moments that I really loved. Um, and then this is the time where I really started to try and mentor non-believers. So like try to go and evangelize, but more in the discipleship aspect towards non-believers, and you know, introducing them to the gospel. So I met a lot of new people, yeah, and I saw a lot of people, you know, from my freshman year, which I'd go do bad things with, and then try to share the gospel with them. You know, I reached out to old friends and family and have gospel talks. For example, one of my friends who's a country artist in Tennessee, sort of like walked away from the faith in a way. And I was able to have genuine conversations with him throughout the year. And hopefully that I'm here now, I'm able to hopefully see him sometime and talk to him about it. And it was just a year of living gratefully, you know, serving the Lord wherever I am and just trying to advance the gospel. Really got into evangelism this past semester and this past school year. And, you know, it's just amazing to see where I was of feeling hopeless and, you know, not feeling loved and all that, to where I am now, where I'm grateful. I feel loved, and I know, like, I know God is good and loving. And yeah, this is my testimony, and it's continuously being written still. And yeah, I'm super grateful for this chat, and I know I'm not very active, and I apologize for that, but yeah, love you guys.